Go. Go. My name is still Ellen Cassidy, and I'm still an enthusiastic, boundlessly grateful Al-Anon.
Hi, Ellen.
Hello, my friends. I've enjoyed being with you so far. My plan today, well, Jimmy asked me a year ago what was going to be the title. I have no idea. I don't even know what's going to happen. So the thought that I had was the gift of loving. And I think one of the reasons that was in my mind was it happened again that some newcomer was there talking about she had a broken picker. And she kept picking the wrong guys. Now it's going to get hot. Oh, well. She kept picking the wrong guys. And my sponsor told me, she said, she said, loving somebody is the best thing we do. The problem is that when we come together with somebody, we don't know how to come back and be a whole, a W-H-O-L-E, not a black hole that sucks up everything that comes around it, but a whole person. And that when we lose ourselves in those relationships. And she said, that's the process of Al-Anon, but loving somebody is never a mistake. Never. I thought when I got to Al-Anon that love was, as I mentioned, obsessive. I needed possession. They needed to be mine. And I thought that if you worried about them long enough, hard enough, that would prove how much you loved them. You should just worry about them all the time. Like somehow, I also think that worrying made me think I had power that I didn't have. If I could worry about it enough, I could get it straight. There's a quote in our One Day at a Time. It's a Thomas Merton quote that says, "The beginning of love is to let those we love be perfectly themselves." And that was a beginning for me. If I really love them, then I have to let them be themselves, however that is. In 1988, after the twins left, I had a friend who her son had AIDS, and they were getting ready to have they lived far away, and they were getting ready to have a baby, and she wasn't going to be allowed to see the baby. And there was a brand new place in Dallas opening up called Brian's House, and it was a place for children directly affected by the HIV virus, either hospice, respite, or daycare for them. And she said, "I want to go there. Will you go with me?" Babies? Count me in. I'm there. She left after 6 months. I was there 8 years. And I was in the nursery one day rocking Chuck. Chuck was about two, I think, at the time, and his mom was in jail, and Grandma was trying to raise him, and he had AIDS. So it was only a matter of time for Chuck. But I was sitting rocking him, and I was talking to him, and I was reading him a book, and I said, "What is it?" It had animals. I said, "What is this?" He didn't know the animals. He didn't know an elephant. He didn't know a giraffe. And I had that moment of consciousness. I'd been in Al-Anon a while at that point, and I had a moment of consciousness where I recognized this precious little soul is going to have been on the planet Earth, and he won't have seen it. And I thought, that just broke my heart. And my sponsor had told me that I'm not love's victim, that love is a choice, that we choose who we're going to love and who we're not going to love. We've been reading a book in my Wednesday night sponsee meeting. It's not conference approved, but in the book the woman says, somebody hurt her feelings, and she told them, "What you said hurt my feelings." And they said, "Oh, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings." And she said, "Yeah, but you didn't mean to love me either." The love is a choice. And made a conscious decision that day, knowing Chuck was going to die and leave me. I made a conscious decision to love Chuck, because I had learned just enough in Al-Anon to know that if I decided to love him, my life would never be the same, and his life would never be the same. Now, they would never let anybody do this these days, but back in those days, they let me. I got permission from his grandmother, and I took him to the zoo. And he saw the animals, and they were overwhelming. He never dreamed. He thought they'd be that big like they were in the book. So he was really surprised to see how big they were. He was in the hospital one time, and there were 3 of us volunteers that he called Mom. And he called me Mom. And he was in the hospital, and I went up and spent time with him. And when I was leaving, the nurse in the hall said, said, "Hey, he called you Mom." I said, "Yeah." I said, "What do your children call you?" He was a different color than I am. And they didn't think it would be possible, but I was Chuck's mom. I was Chuck's mom. After he died at 4 years and 1 month and 7 days old. And after he died, maybe a year later, I had a dream, and this tall, young, handsome black young man came to me, and he said, "You loved me in the beginning, and I'll love you in the end." And I knew he was fine. And I have never been the same because of Chuck. I'm so grateful. My daughter, at her 3rd year birthday, when she got sober the second time and stayed sober for those 20 years, she asked me to introduce her. And I realized when I got up there behind the podium to introduce her for her birthday that I had just been able to allow myself to love her again. But in the disease, I had stopped loving her because I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. But I had made the decision. I remember that. It was such a feeling to recognize that I had decided to love her again. It says in the big book that we are allowed love and tolerance. Love and tolerance is our code. Well, tolerance sounds a bit judgmental to me. I'll tolerate you, but I've judged you. So now I'll have to tolerate you. And I want it to be love and acceptance. I want it to be that acceptance that says, thank you, God, for everything exactly like it is. Thank you. I know there are blessings here, and I want to be here. My brother, and I have many, so this will not narrow it down too much. None of them are in any program. This one, Beer, if it weren't for Beer, he couldn't stay on the planet, so I'm grateful for Beer that he can stay here because I would miss him terribly if he wasn't here. His church and prison ministry are what are saving him. And he wrote me a note one day, and he said, "You know, when we pray, we can feel God's presence. And when we love, we are God's presence." Isn't he wise? For a boy who's drunk every night. I mean, every night. So, the only way, when Carol Ann read that introduction out of How Al-Anon Works, which I think is one of the best books we have ever done, is How Al-Anon Works, for families and friends of alcoholics. The road out for me started at step 1. It started with the willingness to do the steps. And so I want to do as briefly as I can and do like, I'm hoping to get to 9 steps in an hour, in what's left of this little hour. And then when we come back after lunch, I'll do 10, 11, well, who knows? But the last of them, we don't know. We're not there yet. We'll see. In 1981, when I came to Al-Anon, I did the steps because I wanted to belong. I had never felt like I belonged any place in my life. And I wanted to belong, and it seemed like these people who did the steps belonged to each other, and I wanted to belong, and that was the only reason I did the steps. Well, there was another reason. I did the steps mostly to prove to you that they wouldn't work for me. They might work for you, but they weren't going to work for me. I'd do them, and I'd be the martyr, show you they don't work for me. Steps don't care why you work them. They don't care. People talked about detachment with love. Well, sometimes detachment begins with anger, sometimes indifference, sometimes physical. But I wanted that detachment with love. I wanted that ability to be able to care about somebody and not have my life tied up in what they were doing. And that was why I did the steps. I did the steps again the spring of 2018. I thought it was because I had a whole bunch of sponsees who needed to go through the steps again. And I said, we are not doing a book study. We're going to do a step study. You guys just need to get through the steps. We weren't halfway through step 1, and I knew why I was doing the steps. Because I had a whole new life. And I didn't know where I fit in this new life of mine without my husband there beside me, without the hope of Melissa. I didn't know. So I did the steps, and what I discovered is every time I do a step, either for me or with somebody else, I do it with this recognition that there is more than what I can see here. There is more going on here than what I can see. I have learned in Al-Anon that loving relationships are at the heart of spiritual life. Loving relationships with each other, with ourselves, which is where mine really kicked off. Step 1 says we admitted we were powerless. And if this is your first time to hear Al-Anon steps, we have exactly the same steps as AA, with one tiny little change. In step 12, we are not allowed to carry messages to alcoholics. That's how we got here, carrying messages to alcoholics. But we are given, our word is others. Much bigger job for very few people. So, it's perfect. I didn't have any trouble in the beginning with the idea of powerlessness, that I couldn't make these people do what I needed them to do. But I thought would make them healthy. I mean, it wasn't just a matter of me being happy. I thought they would be healthier if they could do these things I wanted them to do. When I got to the year of cancer, I went from powerless to helpless. Not only could I not do anything about them, I couldn't do anything about me. I couldn't do anything about what was going on in my life. And I don't think I could ever have gotten to that if I hadn't already known about step 2, that there was a power, you know. Step 1, in the beginning it would be, oh no, not step 1. No, not again. And then I went through, you get along, you go along, and then you hit step 1 again, and it would sound like, damn it, I am here again. How did I get here? Today it sounds like, such a relief to be at step 1. God, what a relief to know that I'm powerless. There's nothing I have to do. There's no way I can change how this is. And I've discovered that there is no way, I don't want to say this 14 times. There's no way to manage what I'm powerless over. I hear people in Al-Anon say, well, my life is more manageable these days. My life is actually never manageable by me. It's not. My best ideas just get me back to step 1 again. That's all. In 2017, I discovered that I don't get any 2018. I don't get any serenity at step 1. What I get at step 1 is willingness. What I get is dukes down, because I'm so defensive. Dukes down at step 1. There's a friend of mine who has a sign by her door when she walks out, and it says, "Oh God of second chances and new beginnings, here I come again." And that's the way I feel about step 1. Oh God of second chances and new beginnings, here I come again. Step 2 says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. When I worked the steps the first time, I worked them very literally. My job at school was, I was the assistant to the head, and he was a grammarian. He knew when you put semicolons in places and what dashes meant and all that stuff. And that was the way I went through the steps. Step 1 had a dash in it, and he said dashes meant that what was coming up was more important than what you just said. That the most important thing is my life's unmanageable. That's the most important thing. And I got to step 2 and there's no subject. It just says came to believe. And then I started looking at the steps. I went, there are only 2 complete sentences in the steps. Step 1 and step 12. 2 through 11, incomplete sentences, every one of them. Oh, that's maddening for me. Somebody's got to put a subject in there, because but I have this head, and I thought, what's missing? What's missing in those steps is the we understood out of step 1. We understood. And understanding, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I have to understand that powerlessness, recognize that powerlessness, own it. Yeah, step 1 is the problem, step 2 is the solution, and 2 to 12 is how you get, 3 to 12 is how you get to the answer. That's the traditions do the same thing. 1 is the problem, 2 is the answer. The rest of them are how we get there. When I have a plan, I have hope. Until my plan, I can't make a plan big enough to cover all the contingencies. Something is happening in my life that's too big for me to cover all the possibilities in this. And that's when I lost hope. I had lost hope when I came to Al-Anon. I was lonely and alone. The word could in there has made all the difference in my life. That I could be restored. That I was worth being restored. That I was valuable enough to be restored. And restore, what a lovely word. It doesn't say beat back into shape or poured into another mold. It says restored. And that's what you do to something of value. I'm being restored to God's original idea of me. There's no second in my life I want to go back to where it all made sense. There is no such place. I'm being restored to God's idea of me. My feet get me to sanity, not my thoughts. I've learned that, the first thing Al-Anon trained was my feet. Just don't let my head get in the way of my feet. My feet know where to go. Monday night, 6:15, Addison Al-Anon Family Group. It's a doctor's appointment for me. I'm there. I kind of don't get people who go, well, but I was asked to do blah, blah, blah. Me too, but I'm not going there. Because I got to be here. Wednesday night, I have my sponsees come over on Wednesday night. One of them's been off doing AA steps for the month of October. I'm like, okay. But she misses us terribly. Saturday morning, best meeting of the whole week is the step study at the Addison Al-Anon Family Group. That's where I go. What always gets in my way is my glaring self-reliance. Step 3 says, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. I want to turn His will over in His life. What I learned is, after a while, I learned that when I turn over mine, I'm turning theirs over too. I'm turning theirs over too. Sometime in 1981 or 82, I called my sponsor and I told her what horrible thing he was currently doing or not doing. God only knows. And she said, Ellen, if you had to choose between God and Him, who would you pick right now? I said, well, of course I'd pick God. Of course I would. And I realized like 2 weeks later that was step 3. That I had unwittingly taken step 3. Every time I go to a meeting, I recommit to step 3. Every time I take a phone call, I commit to step 3. Every time. It's a recommitment. I don't think I have to do it again, but I think the recommitment on a daily basis is sometimes necessary for me. I don't want to talk about that. Nope. In 2016, my daughter had threatened suicide since she was 6 years old. It had always been a possibility for her. And when she went to treatment, and after Cameron died, we had one of those family week things, and they're supposed to tell us something that, they did that they want us to forgive them for, and we're supposed to tell them something that we want them to forgive us for. And what she wanted to know was, could we forgive her for attempting suicide the week Cameron died? And I said the same thing I said every time that came up. I said, no, I can't do that. No, it is never going to be okay. Never. Well, now it's 2016, and she's in trouble. We got the boys. She calls me one night. We have the same conversation we've had 1,000 times before. She's telling me how bad her life is, nothing's working. And I'm an Al-Anon, and we are told you do not tell people what to do, even if it's glaringly obvious what they should do. You don't get to tell them that. You're supposed to say things like, oh, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Or, wow, never thought of that. And then she said to me what she said to me on every one of those conversations. She said, I don't know what to do. I didn't realize till later that every time she said that to me, I heard a question mark. I hear her asking me, what should I do? Oh, I'm cocked and ready to go. Yes, I am. So I go, blah, and I said, you know what you have to do? This is what you have to do. You have to surrender. You haven't surrendered. If you just surrender. She's doing this, and then I go up one more, and then she goes, what, you mean surrendered? What do you think I did, surrendered? And I caught myself going up again, because that's the way those conversations go. I caught myself going up again, and I went, ugh, I am too tired. I just can't do this. I said, you know what? You need to talk to an alcoholic. And I handed the phone to my husband. You talk to her. The next day in The Courage to Change was January 8th, and it's a page that even refers to the alcoholic as a she. And it says, the alcoholic she has a higher power of her own, and together they are perfectly capable of working out her future. The only thing you can do is love her, and come to think of it, it's enough. That book's been out since 1992. I have read that page every year. Probably been to a meeting or two. But that day I went, what? She does. She has a higher power, even if she doesn't know she does. God doesn't say, well, they don't know I'm here, so I won't be there for them. God can't help it. We are all God's children, whether we recognize it or not. And she had a higher power. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I was out on my morning walk, which is usually when a lot of my praying goes on. And I felt like I let go of this piece of material. It was so thin you could see through it. And I let it go. I physically let go. And I could feel it. I could feel that detachment. She's got to live her life. And I love her. We didn't see much of her. That summer we saw her. We had to go visit her because something was going on with one of the boys. And she said, oh, by the way, I picked up a 6-month chip Friday night. I said, really? When is your sobriety date? It was 3 days after I let go. She got sober. We found a 9-month chip in her car. So I think she got to 9 months. The next day I read a thing in another one of our books, Hope for Today, which is a book written particularly for children of alcoholics. And the book has always ticked me off. I don't like the book. What can I tell you? I don't like the book. So I had started the year off with the idea of you're going to read the book all the way through before you make that kind of decision. This is called contempt prior to investigation. So I was reading the book with a little bit of an attitude, but I was reading the book. And that day there was a thing in there that said, if you do something one time, if you react to something one time, that's a fluke. If you react to something 2 times the same way, that's a coincidence. If you react to something the same way 3 times, that's a pattern. That's a pattern. And the only person's pattern I have any power over is mine. So if I wanted those conversations with her to stop, I was the one. I was the one. I have discovered that this is not a God of my understanding and never will be. This is a God of my experience. It's a God of my experience, a God of my realization. God's presence in my life is only limited by my awareness. That's all. I have discovered that the solution has never included thinking badly of myself. I say to my sponsees all the time, how many times has beating yourself up made you behave better? 0. So why is that such a favorite pastime? Let's stop. 4 says, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves, which is always the word I had to emphasize in Al-Anon, because I'd like to take your inventory, please. I could do a better job, I'm pretty sure, than you could do. I did step 4 the first time because she said I had to do one. And really, I wasn't scared of step 4. I was really scared of step 5. The idea that I was going to have to tell somebody, no. I didn't even want to know it myself, much less tell you. So she said, I said, what do I do? I didn't realize for a long time that this lady that I chose as my sponsor had 6 months more in Al-Anon than I did. And we worked the steps like 2 steps apart. I was on 1, she was on 3, That was the way we went through. So when I got to step 4, she said, just start at the beginning. Well, you're talking to an Al-Anon. So I started with the Big Bang Theory and how I thought life was created on planet Earth. And I just wrote the truth of it all, just wrote it all down. Typed it and corrected it. I guess it was going to be up for publication. I don't know, but that was the way I had to do it. And I left out the real reason I was an Al-Anon. I left it out. Because it never occurred to me to put it in there. It was the kind of thing you didn't tell people. You just didn't. The rest of it was enough to tell. Wasn't going to tell that. What I didn't put in that inventory was that when I came into Al-Anon, I was having an affair with a married man. Wasn't my first one. Wasn't my last one either. We got to go for progress toward perfection. There's really only one more after that, but I wasn't married then. Anyway, what I recognize now is God at work. This woman that heard my 5th step, her children went to my school, and I was having an affair with my boss. And if I told her that, what in order for her to have to keep under wraps? So it just didn't come up. It just didn't come up. It doesn't make it a bad 4th or 5th. It just was the one that needed to happen then. And I really didn't want anything in my life to change. I just wanted reinforcements. I thought if I told you the story, then you'd be on my side. And I needed reinforcements. When I first came to Al-Anon, one of the biggest questions in my life was, what will they think? What will they think of me? What will they think if I do this? What will they think of my children? What will they think of my husband? And the same question has stayed in my life for a good deal of the time. I don't know that it's not still there today, but it's changed into how badly will they think of me to how well will they think of me now? So it's gone into pride. It's gone from self-preservation to pride. Who knew I could be like that? I discovered when I did other 4th steps that I could see the pattern. I really couldn't see a pattern the first time I did a 4th step, but I could see it later. And what I could see is that fear-based decisions always caused more fear. We can only come from one of 2 places. We come from love or we come from fear. And if I make a decision based on fear, there will be more fear in my life. That's what will happen. 5 said, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. It is impossible to grow spiritually by yourself. It's impossible. We have to have each other, which is why the traditions are so critical. We have to have each other. It's where the healing begins. It's the place, 5 is the place that connected me. And the only reason I did 5, even though I was so scared, was because it seemed like there was something different about the people in the room who had done a 5th step. There was something different about their face. There was an assurance. I realize now that it was vulnerability. They were open. They were more open than I was. And I wanted it. I thought maybe you would get the secret handshake or a password or something, And that's not what's happened. When I've heard 5th steps, I love that. You can watch somebody's face change. Their countenance changes in a 5th step. So much of that, the fear and the guilt, fall away from them. And who you see is who they are. I found out in step 5 that I was at the pharmacy the other day, and I love my pharmacist. She and I have been together. We're like this. She knows everything, and she's a hoot. She needs this room badly, but there she is. So it has this thing that comes up that says, do you want, if you'll give us your phone number, we'll text you. No! Every time I see the darn thing, I go, no, 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 no. And that day when I pushed the no, I went, no! And she said, oh, trust issues? I said, no control issues. It's always control. I think if an Al-Anon had written the big book, it would have said lack of control. That was our dilemma. And I'm not sure that it isn't the same thing, you know. I'm just not sure. And I realize it's taken me a lot of years to recognize that control is the way I keep people at a distance. It is a way I make myself safe, I think, is staying in control. I made a list, it's in the back of one of my little notebooks for a couple of years, about all the words we say in Al-Anon instead of the word control. You know, the number one, of course, is help. Help. She told me when I did my last fifth step, she said, honey, if you can't live with them and you can't live without them, it's not about them. Oh, one more time, it's about me. All right. We're moving right along. 6 says we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. We had a 6-step meeting, so they must be doing 7 tomorrow at my group, because last Saturday we did a 6-step meeting. And it got about halfway around the room, and this wise man said, you know, I just read that step. It says we're entirely ready to have God. I'm ready to have God. I'm ready to have God in behind my defenses. I'm ready to have God be in all the soft, vulnerable places in me. I'm ready to have God. Whoa. It says removed. It doesn't say eradicated or erased or whited out. It says removed. And my experience has been that those things are not, most of those things don't disappear, but they are moved away from me. They're moved, I have a space between me and them. It's the pause, the sacred pause that we talk about. Pause. That's what I get with those defects of character that I'm willing to turn over to God. I get a pause. I get a chance when I'm about ready to get into one of those old defects of character. I get the consciousness of what I'm getting ready to do, and I get the opportunity to do something different. I don't want to talk about that either. Okay. There's a great gal, a double winner cross-dresser in my life who, she's great fun. And she has a secret code. She has a code word for just about every step, and her code word for step 6 is perhaps. I have a little meditation room that my husband built me. The December before the boys came to live with us, and we didn't know they were coming to live with us, so that room has been such a gift for me. And there's only one thing on the wall, and one of my sponsees made this thing that just says perhaps. Perhaps. Perhaps I don't know all the answers. Perhaps there is something here I have not seen. Perhaps there is more to this. Perhaps this is none of my business. It's another pause. It's another place. In 2009, I had what the doctor said was my version of a nervous breakdown. She looked at my family history and she said, you know, given your family history, it is a testimony to your 12-step program that you were in your mid-60s before that happened. The other ones were happening back in their 20s and 30s. In this, there was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of it was physical. And somebody gave me this little card, and it says, the obstacles are the path. And so I've come to learn that the obstacles may not be for removal. They may be for my allowance. They may be for me to investigate, to be with. Pretty pleased with myself so far. I've also discovered that struggling is part of the process. It's a process. Somebody emailed me last night and she said, I can't believe I blah, 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 blah. I said, well, now what you have is the curse of awareness. Now you see yourself doing stuff that you can't not do. That's part of the willingness to let it go, is when you recognize it isn't like a bad habit. If it's a bad habit, eventually we will change that. But character defects are actually in our character. They're like below, we're not even conscious of them. They're below, they're in our subconscious. That's where the character defects are. and all of mine were survival tools when I got here. They were all the ways I existed in an alcoholic home. I did the things I needed to do. If you'd come into my house when I was a kid, I was the oldest of 4. We refer to ourselves as the first litter. There's another litter after us. But if you'd come into our home and you'd said, who's the responsible party here, they all would have looked at me and my hand would have gone up. Maybe at 12 or 13. Nobody appointed me responsible party, but the job was obviously open. And I knew I could do a better job than what she was doing, so I took over. One Thanksgiving, I made a Dickens Christmas dinner, complete with duck. I had no idea, but if you're going to do it, you're going to overdo it. That's what I'm going to do. So I told her last night, she said, why do I have to do this again? I said, honey, this is spiritual rehab. This is what happens in spiritual rehab. You get to do it again and again and again and again. But it's a spiral. There's no straight way down, it's a spiral. It looks differently. As my friend Sherry used to say, God, I think I've dealt with those character defects. And I send them off. And she says, then the next thing you know, there's something at the front of the line and I discovered the hard way that it's the same thing. It's just got a different face on it. She said what they do is they go to the end of the line and they get in the costume closet and they find a funny nose and a wig and they show back up. Same thing. Same thing. Step 7 says, humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings, and the word there is humbly, humbly. Humility is not telling the story again. I have made such stories up in my life, and I have identified with the stories. When I did my first 5th step, I had an inkling of awareness to be able to say to her, I honestly don't know how much of this is true. It's the story in my head. And she said, it doesn't matter, it's where you've lived from. So let's just talk about where you lived from. Because if you talk to my brothers and sisters, it sounds like we grew up in a different house. They did not see things the way I saw things. We still don't see things the same way. Humility is not telling the story. I tell the story because I'm recruiting reinforcements. I want to tell you what they did. And I want to hear you go, why, that son of a... I'm not going to speak to him either. Perfect. Pretty soon, nobody will be speaking to him. Humility is not telling the story again. Recognizing that this person is God's child. I have difficulty sometimes, not nearly as much as I used to, with the idea of others. I'll refer to them or others like we're a different breed somehow. Generally, people who don't think like I think. And that's been one of my ongoing projects for myself, has been practicing recognizing that we're all us. There isn't a them. We're all us. Why is not a solution-oriented question. That's a control question. Why? We have a little girl in our room, precious. I'm a teacher's aide at a preschool, 3-year-olds. This is living, my friends. This is living. We have a little girl who's come from England. She's about this tall. She just turned 3. She has blonde hair and blue eyes. She's just the cutest little thing you ever saw. And she'll say, I'm going to the potty. All right, potty. The other kids are like, what? Potty. And then she bites somebody, or she pinches them, or she pulls their hair. She just smiles at them and goes, okay, Somebody said the other day, you seem to have lost hope. I sort of feel like until the parents are ready to do something different, this is pretty much the kid we're going to have, So we're going to have to make a decision about this. But I caught myself going around school the other day telling the story of Ruth again, telling other teachers, guess what she did today? And then I thought, Ellen, you can choose to love that child or tell stories about her, one or the other. We have a little girl in our room who's Indian, and they just had a new baby, and she was such a delightful child until they had the new baby. Now, holy criminy, she's just a demon, You call her name and she's like, oh my gosh. And I prayed before I went to school the other morning, just this, like Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning, and I said, God, please let me show them love and not impatience today. Please let me show them love and not impatience. And she was making me crazy, and it was 10:30 in the morning already. We had a long day ahead of us still. And she was doing something to somebody, and I said, come here. But she came there, and when she got to me, I just hugged her. I put my arms around her, and I hugged her. I didn't do that. God did that, because I just wanted to take her arm off and beat her with it, but that isn't what I did. I hugged her, and she started leaning into me, and she said, I'm so tired. That new baby sleeps in the same room with her. She is not sleeping. She is not sleeping. She's exhausted. Poor little girl. Okay. I can stop telling the stories. A couple of springs ago, somebody said, a couple of falls, somebody said, the trees are about to demonstrate how beautiful letting go is. Now watch the trees. We don't lose, our trees, the leaves all go in one day in Dallas, Texas. It's like summer, winter. But I know that that's God's demonstration one more time, that even the death of the leaf is beautiful, My sponsor said that my job at Step 7 was to find out the opposites of my character defects. And she said, that's what I want you to practice. And I said, really? So I have the power. She said, you don't have any power. She said, this is busy work to keep you out of God's way while God's doing what God's going to do. So you've got to find the opposites of these character defects, and then you're going to practice the opposites. That's a lot harder than it sounds like. It's a lot harder, especially when it's the same defect again and again and again and again and again. So when I did the steps in the spring of 2018, I got to this controlling issue, and she said, now if you get an opposite, you have to write an affirmation that you can say when you feel this thing come up again. Find an affirmation you can say that will give you another way to think about it. So the control, I'm telling you, the internet has got it all. It does. You can put the word and you can say affirmation, and by God, that thing's got like 15 choices you can go with. So I put it up there, and the affirmation that came up was, I love what allowing creates. The word create in there lets me know that I've gotten out of God's way. When I get out of God's way, what God can create here will be amazing. I love what allowing creates. And this impatience and the affirmation for that one was, I'm a loving person contributing to a more loving world. I can do that. Step 8 says, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. I made up stories to justify my anger, my resentment, my whatever the injury was. I made up stories to justify those so I could stay in those. The healing begins when I stop telling those stories. Babs Black she was the founding member of the Addison Al-Anon family group, and Babs Black, whoa, if you ever get to hear Babs Black talk, you need to go for it. When she was dying, she was in the hospital, and it was just miserable. She was just miserable. And the hospice nurse said to her the day before she died, she said, "Miss Black, is there anything we can do to make you more comfortable?" "Yes. I want a sailor and a whiskey." And she said, and her daughter said, "Well, you better ask for condoms too, because you don't want to get AIDS at this late day." And the nurse said, "Well, it's certainly amazing that you can joke at a time like this." And Babs said, "Who's joking?" They teach us how to die. I swear to God, they teach us how to die. Babs used to say that what you are going to make amends for, you took things for people and you have to give back what you took. I've taken people's security from them, my children's, by my need to run their lives and not allowing them to know they could do it themselves. I used to terrify my mother when I was a kid because I did things that my mother could not imagine people doing. I did them, and she caught me doing them. And when Mama died, she died after a 3-week illness, and we hadn't had the time. I never knew until after she died where she started and I ended. I always could get in the room with my mom, and however she felt, I felt. Whatever was going on over there, I soaked it up. And after she died, this was some years after she died, this maybe a decade after she died, I had a dream one night, and in my dream we were in her living room, and my uncle and my sister-in-law were sitting there having a very loud discussion. But both of them loved those kind of discussions. My mother hated that, all of that. It sounded confrontational to her, and she couldn't bear to be in that. So in my dream, they're with each other, and my mom's over there doing all the body language stuff, all that stuff. She wouldn't say anything. She'd just shrivel up, In my disease with her, I would have had to turn away. I just can't watch her do that. In my dream, what I did was I got up and I went over to her, and I took her by the hands, and I said, "Mom, you were going to show me how to cook those beans, remember?" And I took her out with me, and it was healed. It was healed right there and then. So the amends can come when the amends come. I'm cool with my mom these days. Very cool. Isn't there something else about that? I think there is. God gives us grace and mercy to fill in the gaps. I'll probably talk about this later too, but there's a huge gap in the world, as best I see it, between what should be done and what is being done. My oldest granddaughter had a borderline IQ, 69-70, bordering on mentally retarded. And her parents didn't do anything for her to address that. They just tried to drill her harder so that she could say the ABCs and da-da-da-da and do all that stuff. It wasn't until she went to high school that they actually put her in special classes. But she was sent out into the world totally unprepared for life on planet Earth. And it wasn't long before she was pregnant and living in homeless shelters and had the baby, and I had called CPS, and one of his family members had called CPS. And so when the homeless shelter was ready to take the baby away from her, they called me and said, will you come get the baby? Not mine to do. I know what's mine to do. It's not mine to do. That is not mine to do. If I take somebody else's job, I'm keeping... we say in Al-Anon, I don't get in the way of my spiritual growth, but I don't want to get in the way of somebody else's spiritual growth. If it's not my job, it's somebody else's job, and I knew that was not my job. My daughter took the job. She said, "They took my boys." She said, "I'm so grateful. Let me go get this baby." Well, they wouldn't let her have the baby because she wasn't blood related. And they said blood was the only assurance of commitment. What? Okay. Baby ended up with somebody in his family, and she ended up having to give up the baby and all that stuff. And the state of Texas decided that these parents were unfit parents. she was 21, so it didn't really matter much. But and they gave her clothes in a trash bag, and off she went. And I was so incensed about what should have been done for that child and was not done for that child. And then I go to an Al-Anon meeting, and they say, today we're going to read about everybody is doing the best they can. Really? Really? I don't think so. Made me madder than I was when I walked in there, I was mad when I left there. And then, the magic happens, a moment of quiet happens, and I hear a word, gaps. I don't know if I said it or if somebody else said it, but I heard the word gaps. There's such gaps in what should have been and what was done. And I know the answer to that. God happens in the gaps. That's God's territory, the gaps. I do what is mine to do. I care about the children of the world, and I cannot take them all in. But I sponsor a child in Africa. I sponsor a child in Honduras. I sponsor a child in Bolivia, I think it is. But I got 3, and I had lots of kids through the years that I sponsor. It doesn't cost me, I can do it. I can afford it. And it's like this starfish on the beach, You can't save them all. All the starfish watch up, and there's a guy going along throwing them back in the ocean one at a time. Never get them all. And he said, well, it makes a difference to this one. It makes a difference to those children. That's something I can do. That's what I can do. So God fills in those gaps with mercy and grace. He gives us enough money to help somebody else. I feel responsible, but I act defensive. That's what I do. And so... I say, okay. I heard about a thing some years ago called spiritual hospitality. It's an interesting idea that I do for other people what I can do for other people because I can do that for them with no strings attached. And that is sort of the attitude I've taken toward my 8-step amends in the last several years. That's part of my spiritual hospitality. 9 says, may direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Without forgiveness, I am anchored in the past, forever in emotional debt. Without forgiveness. There's a guy in our group that says, this says such people. It doesn't say, if you can't find that person exactly, find the such people. Find the people that fill that place in your life and make that amend with them. Give to them what you took from the other person. If the other person is dead or you don't know where they are or whatever that is. It's a such people. That has helped me immeasurably. My daughter's second husband would call me on the phone and he'd say, Ellen, I tell you what she's doing. She's a mess. You need to do something. I said, you're the adult there. You do something. That's your job. It's yours to do. And he'd call me again and he'd tell me again, and I got angrier and angrier, but because I'm feeling helpless. And so I was angry, really angry at him. And when she died, I was even angrier. She killed herself in her car in front of his house. It was the ultimate F.U. She's making a statement even in her death, And I was mad at him as I could be. And when we had her service, he called and he said, is it okay for me to come? Because he knew she had friends who wouldn't want her there, wouldn't want him there. I said, of course you can come. Of course you can come. And I stayed mad. I just stayed mad at him. And I recognized today it was my need for me to think that somebody had the power to make it any different. And nobody had the power to make it any different. It was her life. When I let go of her that day in January of 2016, and then in January of 2017 when she died, I recognized that I had given her 1 year of her own life. She had threatened suicide since she was 6, and I had lived in holding myself hostage to that for all those years. And I had given her 1 year to live her own life without interference by my fears or my old ideas or my help. She lived her own life. And she would always say to me, because I'd tell her, I'm so mad at him, she'd say, Mom, don't be mad at him. I'm the one doing this, not him. I'm the one doing this. So we were going to, he was going to be at Crested Butte, and I was going to be at Crested Butte, and I could hear her. I wanted my daughter at peace more than anything. I wanted my daughter at peace, and I knew that meant I had to make amends to him, and I had to clean that up as best I could. And I picked a night, praying. I was waiting to want to, never got the want to, never did, but I knew I had to do it. We had taken her ashes up to the mountain, and her boys and her friends and I had taken her ashes out on the mountain. I knew I had to do it, so I went over to him and I said, "Look, if we're ever going to be friends, I need to say something to you." Oh, and he goes, "Oh, Ellen, we've always been friends." And I pinched his little lips together while I'm thinking, do your friends treat you like this? They don't speak to you when you speak to them? When you touch them, they shrivel? They talk about you to anybody who'll listen about how evil you are and bad you are and blah, 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 blah. Is that the way your friends talk? Buddy, you need some new friends. And I said, you need to listen to me. Just listen to me. And I said, I have treated you poorly, badly, unkindly, consistently. And I apologize. That's not who I want to be. I recognize that I did that I had hoped you would have the power to change it, and I recognize now that you didn't. You didn't. And I apologize. I hope you can forgive me. Oh, of course. Gotcha. I'm so near done, it's just breathtaking. So my Wednesday night group was reading a Anthony DeMello book, and he said that people choose to be unkind. I think the word he used was evil, but I don't know about the evil thing. I think unkind is enough for me. Out of a lack of sensitivity and awareness. That's the only reason they do it, not out of malice. A lack of sensitivity and awareness. And consciousness, I think was the word. And so I went back on Wednesday night and I told the girls another story. I told them about my amends story and that he said blah, 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 blah. And one of the girls said, "Oh, Ellen, he just isn't conscious. He just couldn't hear that." And I went, oh, because the rest of the DeMello thing talked about this is what humans do. This is the way humans behave. The next Monday night at my meeting, I'm thinking, oh, he's just human. How about that? So the next Monday night at my meeting, I walked around the room after the meeting, ha, 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 making people laugh, ha, 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 all around the room. I get over to the other side, and I said something unkind about a dear friend of mine who was in the room. Not the first time I did that. I said something unkind. And in my head, I said the same thing I've said for 74, well, however many years it was then. I said, oh, why did you do that? And that was the first time I heard myself ask the question. I said, why did you do that? And I had to say to me, I don't know why I did that. Maybe for a cheap laugh, but I don't know why I did it. And then I realized I wasn't conscious. I didn't do that because I was a bad person. I didn't do that because I was not conscious of it. I just didn't have the awareness of it until then. And all of a sudden, I love that guy. I just love him. I really do. My heart goes out to him. He's as destroyed as the rest of us are, you know. I totally understand. I've joined the human race, and I had my first taste of compassion. And for that, I'm very grateful. So let's stop, because we're going to come back and do 10, 11, and 12 after lunch, okay? Are you good, Lee? Okay. Lee's good.